happiness through relationships, achievements, and material success. I thought if I could just find the right person, land the perfect job, or accumulate enough wealth, then finally, maybe you've been on that same journey, always reaching for the next thing that promises to fill that void inside. That void isn't real. It's an illusion created by our conditioning, by society's messages that we're somehow incomplete on our own. From our earliest days, we're taught that happiness comes from outside ourselves, from getting good grades, from winning approval, from finding the one. We internalize these messages so deeply that we forget our natural state of being. Think about a child playing alone in their backyard, completely absorbed in their imagination. They don't need expensive toys or constant entertainment. They don't need someone else's approval or validation. They're simply being who they are. And in that pure state of being, they're completely content. What happened to that child within you? When did you start believing that you needed something or someone else to make you happy? These aren't just rhetorical questions. They're invitations to explore the core beliefs that have shaped your relationship with happiness. Let me share something profound with you. Every time you felt genuine happiness, it wasn't because of what happened outside of you. It was because of something that awakened inside you. That promotion at work didn't create happiness. It allowed you to recognize your own capability. That perfect romantic moment didn't create happiness. It allowed you to experience the love that was already within you. But we've been trained to attribute our happiness to external circumstances. It's like living in a house with all the lights on, but constantly looking outside for light. We've forgotten that we're the source of our own illumination. Now, I'm not suggesting that relationships aren't beautiful or that success isn't worth pursuing. What I am saying is that making your happiness dependent on these external factors is like building your house on shifting sand. People change, circumstances change, but your inherent capacity for happiness remains constant if you know where to look for it. Some of you might be thinking, but I've been alone and it feels terrible. Yes, there's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of connection with yourself. When you truly connect with yourself, solitude becomes a sanctuary rather than... How many people do you know who are in relationships but still unhappy? How many successful people still feel empty inside? If happiness truly came from outside ourselves, then everyone who had these external things would be consistently happy. But we know that's not the case. The truth is, happiness is your natural state of being. Just like a cloud doesn't need to try to be a cloud. You don't need to try to be happy. You only need to remove the obstacles that block you from recognizing your true nature. These obstacles are primarily our conditioned beliefs about what we need to be happy. I need someone to complete me. I need to achieve more. I need to be different than I am. Each of these beliefs is like a layer of dust on a mirror, obscuring your reflection. The mirror, your true self, remains perfect and complete, but you can't see it clearly through all these accumulated layers. The journey we're embarking on today isn't about adding something to yourself. It's about stripping away these false beliefs that have convinced you that you're incomplete on your own. It's about remembering who you really are beneath all the conditioning and social programming. I need someone else to make me happy. This belief is so deeply ingrained in our culture that we barely question it. We've all heard phrases like my better half or my soulmate, suggesting that we're somehow incomplete on our own. But think about this logic. If you believe you need someone else to make you happy, you're giving away your power to create your own emotional state. You're saying, I am not enough on my own. This belief doesn't just make you dependent on others. It actually pushes away the very happiness you're seeking. When you approach relationships from a place of need rather than wholeness, you create pressure and expectations that often lead to disappointment. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. No matter how much someone pours into you, you'll never feel full because you haven't addressed the real issue, the belief in your own incompleteness. The real transformation begins when you start to see yourself as complete just as you are. This isn't about positive thinking or forcing yourself to feel happy. It's about recognizing a truth that's already there, like the sun behind the clouds. The sun doesn't stop shining just because we can't see it. And your inherent completeness doesn't disappear just because you've temporarily lost sight of it. Let me share a profound truth that changed my entire perspective. Every relationship in your life is actually a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. When you're at peace with yourself, you attract peaceful relationships. When you're comfortable with solitude, you attract relationships that enhance your life rather than complete it. Think about the last time you felt desperate for someone's attention or approval. In that state of need, did you show up as your best self? Did you make choices that honored who you truly are? Or did you find yourself compromising, trying to be what you thought they wanted you to be? This pattern of seeking happiness through others often starts early in life. We learn to gauge our worth through the reactions of those around us. A smile from a parent, approval from a teacher, acceptance from our peers. These become the external markers we use to measure our internal state. But this is like trying to navigate by looking at reflections in a broken mirror. The image is distorted, unreliable. The truth is, you are the only person who will be with you every moment of your life. From your first breath to your last, you are your own constant companion. Doesn't it make sense to develop that relationship first? To become your own best friend, your own source of comfort and joy? Some of you might be thinking, but what about love? What about connection? Aren't these fundamental human needs? Yes, they absolutely are. But there's a world of difference between wanting connection and needing it to feel complete. When you approach relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need, you create space for genuine connection rather than codependence. When you're truly at peace with yourself, you become like a full cup that naturally overflows. You don't need others to fill you up. Instead, your own fullness spills over and enriches every relationship in your life. This is the paradox of self-sufficiency. When you no longer need others to make you happy, you become capable of forming deeper, more authentic connections. But this journey to self-sufficiency isn't always easy. Our society often treats self-sufficiency as somehow selfish or antisocial. We're taught that needing others is a sign of being human, that independence is somehow cold or unfeeling. This couldn't be further from the truth. True self-sufficiency isn't about building walls. It's about building a strong foundation. It's about creating a core of inner peace that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. When you have this, you don't withdraw from relationships. You engage with them from a place of strength and authenticity rather than need and fear. Let's talk about fear for a moment. Specifically, the fear of being alone. This fear drives so many of our decisions, often unconsciously. We stay in unfulfilling relationships, compromise our values, or lose ourselves trying to please others, all because we're afraid of facing ourselves. But what if being alone wasn't something to fear? What if solitude was actually a pathway to discovering your own completeness? In those quiet moments when there's no one to impress, no role to play, no expectations to meet, that's when you have the opportunity to truly know yourself. The interesting thing about getting comfortable with solitude is that it changes how you experience everything else. When you're no longer afraid of being alone, you make choices from a place of genuine desire rather than fear. You choose relationships because they add joy to your life, not because you're trying to fill a void. This brings us to another important aspect of self-sufficient happiness: authenticity. When your happiness isn't dependent on others' approval, you're free to be genuinely yourself. Think about how much energy we spend trying to be what others want us to be. It's exhausting, isn't it? And the cruel irony is that this very effort to secure others' approval often leads us further from true happiness. Being authentic means accepting all parts of yourself, not just the parts that others approve of or understand. It means acknowledging your shadows as well as your light, your fears as well as your strengths. This complete self-acceptance is the foundation of lasting happiness. You might be wondering, but what about when life gets really hard? What about loss, failure, or disappointment? These are valid questions. Self-sufficient happiness doesn't mean you won't experience pain or sadness. What it means is that you have a stable core that can weather these storms without being destroyed by them. Like when you're standing in your own truth, when you're connected to your inner source of happiness, you become like a mighty tree with deep roots. The storms of life may cause your branches to sway, but they can't uproot you because your stability comes. This inner stability also transforms how you approach challenges. Instead of seeing difficulties as threats to your happiness, You begin to see them as opportunities for growth. When your sense of well-being isn't dependent on everything going right, you develop a resilience that no external circumstance can shake. Now let's talk about something that might seem counterintuitive at first. The role of gratitude in self-sufficient happiness. When you're feeling incomplete or lonely, gratitude might be the last thing on your mind. But here's a profound truth, like a key that unlocks your awareness of your own completeness. Most of us have been conditioned to practice gratitude for things outside ourselves, our possessions, our relationships, our circumstances. Well, there's nothing wrong with this. The most powerful form of gratitude is actually appreciating your own existence, your own consciousness, your own capacity to experience life in all its richness. Think about this. Every morning when you wake up, you're given another day of consciousness, another day to experience, to feel, to think, to be. Before you worry about what's missing in your life or who isn't there, can you appreciate the miracle of your own existence? Can you be grateful for your ability to perceive, to wonder, to dream? This shift in perspective, from seeking reasons to be happy outside yourself to recognizing the gift of your own being, is revolutionary. It's like switching on a light in a room you thought was dark. Nothing outside has changed, but suddenly you can see the abundance that was there all along. But let's be honest, this isn't always easy. Our minds are habituated to focus on what's missing rather than what's present. This isn't your fault. It's actually a survival mechanism that served our ancestors well. But in our modern world, this tendency to focus on lack often creates unnecessary suffering. The good news is that you can retrain your mind. Just as a muscle grows stronger with exercise, your capacity for self-sufficient happiness grows stronger with practice. Each time you catch yourself thinking, I need someone or something to be happy, gently remind yourself of your inherent completeness. One of the most powerful practices is to become aware of the stories you tell yourself about happiness. Notice how often these stories involve conditions. I'll be happy when, or I could be happy if only. These stories are like chains that bind your happiness to external circumstances. The truth is, happiness isn't a destination. It's your natural state when you stop believing the stories that tell you you're incomplete. It's like the blue sky that's always there behind the clouds. The clouds are your thoughts, your conditioning, your beliefs about where you need to be happy. May temporarily obscure it, but they can't change its essential nature. This brings us to another crucial aspect of self-sufficient happiness, the present moment. Notice how thoughts of incompleteness always involve either the past or the future. I was happier when, or I'll be happy once. But real happiness can only be experienced in the now when you're fully present. Not reaching for something outside this moment, you might discover that happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you notice. It's in the simple awareness of being alive, in the subtle joy of breathing, in the quiet pleasure of existing. But our culture doesn't value this kind of happiness. We're taught to always be striving, achieving, acquiring. We're conditioned to believe that contentment equals complacency. This couldn't be further from the truth. True contentment, the kind that comes from within, actually provides the stable foundation from which authentic growth and achievement can spring. When you're no longer driven by the desperate need to find happiness outside yourself, you're free to pursue your dreams from a place of inspiration rather than lack. Your actions come from a desire to express your gifts rather than fill a void. This is the difference between creating from fullness and creating from emptiness. This brings us to the concept of purpose. Many people believe they need to find their purpose to be happy. But what if it's the other way around? What if connecting with your own inner happiness actually reveals your purpose? When you're no longer searching for happiness in the external world, you can hear the quiet voice of your authentic calling. Your purpose isn't something you find. It's something you uncover by removing the layers of conditioning that tell you you need to be something other than what you are. It's like a stream that naturally flows when you remove the obstacles in its path. This is why self-sufficient happiness is so powerful. It frees you to be who you truly are rather than who you think you need to be to deserve happiness. When you realize that happiness is your natural state, not something you need to earn or achieve, everything changes. You begin to see that Every experience, even the challenging ones, is an opportunity to know yourself more deeply. Loneliness becomes an invitation to discover your own companionship. Silence becomes a chance to hear your inner wisdom. Solitude becomes a space for self-discovery, rather than a condition to be avoided. This doesn't mean you won't continue to enjoy relationships and connections. In fact, when you're grounded in self-sufficient happiness, your relationships become richer and more authentic. You're no longer trying to get something from others that you think you lack. You're sharing from your own fullness. Consider how this might transform your existing relationships. When you no longer need others to make you happy, you're free to love them exactly as they are. You no longer need them to behave in certain ways or meet certain expectations for you to feel complete. This is true love. Love that springs from fullness rather than need. Let's talk about something that often gets overlooked when we discuss happiness, the courage it takes to stand in your own completeness. Our society often celebrates dependency, portraying it as romantic or deep connection. It takes real courage to say, I am enough on my own. This isn't about being invulnerable or building walls. It's about having the strength to face yourself honestly, to sit with your own thoughts, to be comfortable in your own presence. Many people spend their entire lives running from this encounter with themselves, filling every moment with noise and distraction. But here's what happens when you develop the courage to be with yourself. You discover that beneath all the mental chatter, beneath all the conditioned needs and fears, there's a profound peace. It's like diving beneath turbulent waves to find the quiet depths of the ocean. This inner peace isn't something you create. It's something you uncover. It's always been there, like a radio station that's constantly broadcasting, but that you haven't tuned into because there was too much static in the way. The static is your conditioned beliefs about what you need to be happy. One of the most persistent forms of static is the belief that there's something wrong with being alone. We've been conditioned to see solitude as a problem to be solved rather than a gift to be embraced. But consider that every great spiritual teacher, every profound philosopher, every deep thinker has recognized the value of solitude. In solitude, you begin to distinguish between your authentic voice and the voices you've internalized from others. You start to recognize which of your desires are truly yours and which have been implanted by society. This clarity is essential for genuine happiness. Think about how many of your choices are influenced by the fear of being alone. How many compromises have you made? How many parts of yourself have you silenced? How many dreams have you abandoned because you were afraid of standing alone? The price of depending on others for happiness is often the sacrifice of your own truth. But when you embrace your own company, when you become comfortable with solitude, you develop a kind of inner strength that nothing external can shake. You no longer make choices from fear, but from wisdom. You no longer seek relationships from need, but from love. This inner strength transforms how you show up in the world. When you know that you're complete on your own, you stop trying to prove your worth to others. You stop seeking validation for your choices. You stop needing agreement for your decisions. This is true freedom. And here's something remarkable. When you attain this freedom, when you no longer need others to make you happy, you become capable of forming the deepest and most authentic connections. It's like the difference between a drowning person grabbing onto others for survival and a strong swimmer choosing to swim alongside others for the joy of companionship. This brings us to another crucial aspect of self-sufficient happiness. The boundaries. When your happiness depends on others, it's difficult to set healthy boundaries. You might tolerate behavior that doesn't align with your values because you're afraid of losing the person you think you need to be happy. But when you know that your happiness comes from within, you can set boundaries with love and clarity. You can say no without guilt. You can walk away from situations that don't serve your highest good. You can choose your relationships rather than letting your relationships choose you. This ability to set boundaries actually makes you more capable of genuine intimacy. When you know where you end and others begin, when you're clear about what you will and won't accept, you create the conditions for real connection rather than codependence. Consider how this might transform your professional life as well. When you're no longer seeking happiness through achievement or recognition, you're free to pursue work that truly matters to you. You can take risks, because your sense of well-being doesn't depend on external success. This inner freedom also changes how you handle failure. When your happiness isn't tied to outcomes, failure becomes feedback rather than catastrophe. You can learn and grow from setbacks without them threatening your fundamental sense of well-being. The same principle applies to creativity. When you're creating from a place of inner fullness rather than trying to fill an inner void, your creative expression becomes more authentic and powerful. You're no longer trying to prove anything or get anything. You're simply allowing your inner truth to... This brings us to a profound paradox. The less you need from the world, the more the world tends to offer you. When you're no longer approaching life from a place of need or desperation, when you're no longer trying to get something to make you happy, you become magnetic. Think about the people you most enjoy being around. Aren't they often the ones who don't need anything from you? The ones who are comfortable in their own skin, who bring their own joy to the party? This is the natural charisma of self-sufficient happiness. But remember, this isn't about pretending you don't need anything or anyone. It's about recognizing that your essential happiness, your fundamental well-being, is already complete within you. From this place of completeness, you can choose to engage with others, to create, to achieve, not because you need to, but because you want to. As we move toward concluding our time together, let's address the question that might be arising in your minds. How do I begin this journey to self-sufficient happiness? The answer is both simpler and more profound than you might expect. Start by questioning every belief you have about what you need to be happy. Each time you catch yourself thinking, I need this or I need that to be happy, pause and ask yourself, is this true? Or is it just a conditioned belief? Remember, your mind will resist this questioning. It's invested in maintaining the belief that happiness comes from outside because that's what it knows, that's what it's been trained to believe. But you are not your mind. You are the awareness that can observe these thoughts and choose whether to believe them. This is where the real practice begins. Instead of trying to find happiness, start noticing the happiness that's already present in the simple fact of being alive. Notice the peace that's available in each breath. Notice the joy that's inherent in simple awareness. Some of you might be thinking, but what about when life is really challenging? What about when I'm dealing with real problems? This is a crucial question. Self-sufficient happiness doesn't mean you won't face difficulties or feel pain. What it means is that beneath the surface waves of life's ups and downs, you remain connected to a deeper current of well-being. Think of it like this. The depths of the ocean remain calm even when the surface is turbulent. Your essential nature is like those ocean depths, eternally peaceful, complete, whole. The storms of life may create waves on the surface of your experience, but they can't disturb your deepest nature unless you believe they can. This understanding transforms how you approach life's challenges. Instead of seeing difficulties as obstacles to happiness, you begin to see them as opportunities to deepen your connection with your own inner resources. Every challenge becomes an invitation to remember who you really are. The practice of self-sufficient happiness also involves learning to distinguish between love and need. When your happiness depends on others, what feels like love is often actually need in disguise. But when you're connected to your own inner completeness, you can love others purely without needing anything from them. This is true freedom. The freedom to love without need, to give without expecting anything in return, to be yourself without seeking approval. This freedom is your natural state, but you have to be willing to challenge everything you've been taught about happiness to rediscover it. The journey to self-sufficient happiness is also a journey of self-trust. You've been taught to look outside yourself for answers, to seek validation from others, to depend on external guidance. But the deepest truth is that you already know what you need to know. You already are what you're seeking to become. This doesn't mean you won't continue to learn and grow, but it means that your growth will come from a place of self-trust rather than self-doubt, from a desire to express more of who you are rather than a need to become something you're not. As you embrace this truth, you'll notice something remarkable. Your relationships become more authentic. Your work becomes more meaningful. Your creativity flows more freely. When you no longer need these things to make you happy, you're free to engage with them from a place of genuine inspiration. When you no longer need anything or anyone to complete you, everything and everyone in your life becomes a gift rather than a necessity. You can enjoy success without being attached to it. Love others without needing them to love you back. Create without needing recognition. The world needs people who have found this inner freedom. In a culture that profits from our sense of incompleteness, choosing to recognize your own wholeness is a revolutionary act. Every person who awakens to their own self-sufficient happiness creates ripples that affect countless others. Think about how different the world would be if more people recognized their own completeness. Imagine relationships based on sharing rather than need, work driven by inspiration rather than desperation, creativity flowing from fullness rather than... You are part of this transformation. Every time you choose to remember your own completeness rather than seeking happiness outside yourself, you contribute to a shift in collective consciousness, your personal journey to self-sufficient happiness. So I invite you to begin this journey, not by trying to become something you're not, but by remembering who you already are. Start with this moment. Notice the awareness that's reading these words. Notice the consciousness that's experiencing this. That awareness, that consciousness is complete, whole, lacking nothing. Let this be your practice. Instead of seeking happiness, become curious about the happiness that's already here. Instead of trying to fill an inner void, question whether that void is real. Instead of looking for completion in the future, discover the completeness that's present now. Remember, you're not your thoughts about yourself. You are the awareness in which these thoughts arise. You are not your feelings about yourself. You are the space in which these feelings come and go. You are not your story about yourself. You are the consciousness that's aware of these stories. This is the ultimate truth. You are the happiness you seek. You are the love you long for. You are the completion you desire. Everything else is just a magnificent play of life, to be enjoyed but not needed, to be embraced but not grasped, to be lived but not dependent on. Let this understanding sink deep into your being. Let it transform how you see yourself and your place in the world. Let it free you from the endless search for happiness outside yourself. Let it reveal the joy that's already here, the peace that's already present, the love that you already are. The journey to self-sufficient happiness isn't about becoming something new. It's about returning to what you've always been. It's about remembering your own completeness, recognizing your own wholeness, awakening to your own inner light. This is your birthright. This is your true nature. This is who you really are. Thank you for sharing this journey of discovery. May you recognize the happiness that's already within you, the completeness that's already here, the joy that you already are.